Hey y'all, I'm sure you've heard all about the Karmelo Anthony case that is going to trial right now. Karmelo Anthony is being charged with the first-degree murder of Austin Metcalf. Karmelo and Austin were both attending a high school track and field meet when Austin approached Karmelo to tell him to leave their team's tent. Karmelo gave pushback about leaving, an altercation ensued, and Karmelo ended up stabbing Austin, resulting in Austin's death. Karmelo claims he did it in self-defense. Now, if you didn't do track and field, then you wouldn't really know about the tent situation. It's not like the teams just reserved a section of seating for themselves and Karmelo just didn't know. The tents are set up by each school/team as a means of shade and storage for their athletes, their equipment, and their bags. It's where the team can meet up. So to go under another team's tent is very invasive and disrespectful. It's a way to get under someone's skin and force a reaction. However, according to Karmelo, it had just started to rain and he was seeking the tent for shelter. According to some eyewitnesses, Austin was heard telling Karmelo he had to move. Karmelo resisted, which prompted Austin to repeat himself, telling Karmelo to move. This made Karmelo reply with something along the lines of, "Touch me and find out." To which Austin responded by pushing Karmelo. Karmelo then immediately pulled out his knife and stabbed Austin. Karmelo then threw the weapon and ran. Once he was caught, he confessed right away to the police, saying he acted in self-defense. Now, I've seen a lot of content creators just straight up say Karmelo is horrible, but I don't feel that way necessarily. This trial has already proved to be very interesting because there are valid arguments to be made on both sides, and some of the prosecution's decisions may have already warranted a potential acquittal. I'm going to focus on the potential that Karmelo Anthony has in being able to get off on this, and by on this, I mean the first-degree murder charge. I hope people can see that there is a much bigger conversation to be had here. I know they are pursuing first degree because Karmelo threatened, "Touch me and find out," which, according to them, indicates that he was thinking even just for a split second about stabbing Austin before he actually stabbed him, which means it's first degree because you thought about it before doing it. Now, that's an okay argument, but for me, I don't think it's completely foolproof for multiple reasons. The first reason is just because Karmelo said, "Touch me and find out," doesn't mean he actually expected Austin to touch him. Maybe saying that was Karmelo's way of trying to warn Austin or to get Austin to back up off of him. So when Austin actually went ahead and pushed Karmelo, Karmelo reacted in the moment by pulling the knife. Truly a reaction of the moment. Although some eyewitnesses confirmed that Karmelo had his hand in his bag during the entire confrontation, which would indicate he was prepared to pull the weapon and potentially thinking about pulling it. However, it's important to remember that criminal court requires the prosecution to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning there cannot be even an ounce of doubt as to what happened after the evidence is presented. Every gap must be filled. And unfortunately, for this case, eyewitness testimony is never enough alone to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt because the human brain and memory is flawed, especially when it comes to situations of high stress and adrenaline. Also, all of the witnesses from the tent were friends of Austin's, which gives them a motive to potentially be untruthful. And there has already been inconsistencies in the eyewitness accounts about Austin shoving Karmelo. Now, the second reason I don't think this should be considered first-degree murder is because of the racial undertone behind it. We all know that white boys are the number one hecklers. They like to troll people until they snap and then act like that person is crazy for reacting. These types of men think they are above everyone else and that everyone else has to listen to them and succumb to their jokes. So when people choose not to listen to them, they can get rather feisty. If you don't believe me, I have a video to prove it. In this video, there is a young black boy, probably around the age of 12 to 14, who seems to be a bit oblivious to the situation he's in. He's seen on the side of a riverbank in his life jacket, being scolded by his white friends to just swim a little ways out to them. But the boy is obviously too scared. Luckily, this really kind family is paddleboarding past at the same time and overhear this boy being verbally abused. So they decide to help him swim over to his so-called friends. In the video, you can hear his friends calling him names and saying they won't do anything to him because his mom is always worried about him. There are people who believe these boys were planning to get this boy to swim out a little ways to them and then abandon him there to drown as a good old-fashioned joke.
Make no mistake, they were prepared to execute him. For those of you guys who are not aware or haven't seen this video, if it wasn't for this family here, a black boy would have been killed. This family just so happened to be out paddleboarding when they heard a boy screaming, saying he couldn't swim. He was being taunted, monkey noises, and they were able to get him out of the situation. He was set up by its so-called friends.
You can swim down, River, you fucking retard. I think I'm staying here. Bro, how am I gonna get you back home? You don't think Mama Marquise is gonna be worried? Yeah, your mom. My mom's name. My dad's your mom is always worried about you. My dad's in prison. I think that's why. Your dad's in prison. We know. We can tell by looking at you. Bro, we get you can't swim. Bro, just don't get a kayak. I'll just wait. Fucking life jacket on, Marquise. I'll just wait. Bro, you have a life jacket. I'm gonna die. Standing right
Hold on to the
You have to go.
I'm just trying to get over there. We taught him how to swim.
Oh, so I can just like hold on to that leg.
And here if you want.
Yeah, I might drown.
You won't drown.
Bro, you won't drown. You're not going to drown. I promise you won't drown.
There you go.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Huh?
What's your name?
Oh, my name is Marquise. But everybody calls me LeVar.
If we have not found Marquise, we need to find him.
This is the type of racism that black people have to deal with daily and that white people act willfully ignorant to. And so I think Karmelo Anthony has a chance here to claim reactive abuse and DARVO. DARVO stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse, Victim, and Offender, which is a manipulation tactic used by perpetrators to evade accountability and shift blame onto the victim. It involves three main steps. First, deny. The perpetrator denies that the harmful behavior occurred or minimizes its significance, often gaslighting the victim to make them question their memory or perception of events. Second, attack. The perpetrator attacks the victim's credibility, character, or behavior, sometimes extending the attack to the victim's family or friends. This shifts attention away from the perpetrator and creates confusion or self-doubt in the victim. And third, reverse, victim, and offender. The perpetrator positions themselves as the true victim, portraying the original victim as the aggressor. This reversal can manipulate observers' perceptions, garner sympathy for the perpetrator, and further isolate the actual victim. At a grander scale, this is basically what Karmelo was experiencing. Deny. People deny their racism, even when they're blatantly doing it in front of your face. This can lead someone to feel crazy or that maybe they're too sensitive. The second is attack, saying black people are dumb and chimping out, dropping the N-word. We have all heard white dudes saying the N-word like it's their day job. Let's not play pretend here. They continue to stereotype black people in hopes of making them feel less than. It's all a way to attack the black community. And the third, reverse, victim, and offender, is when the black person finally snaps at the white person who has been nipping, and that white person then throws their hands up, acting all surprised, and then proceeds to call the black person aggressive after they finally stick up for themselves. Reactive abuse happens when someone who has been emotionally, psychologically, or physically abused reaches a breaking point and responds with defensive behaviors such as yelling, name-calling, crying, or even physical actions like pushing or hitting. These reactions are self-defense responses triggered by prolonged provocation, stress, or fear, rather than intentional attempts to control or harm the abuser. The phenomenon often arises after years of emotional abuse, gaslighting, or escalating physical abuse. The victim's nervous system is overwhelmed, activating the fight response as a survival mechanism. Abusers exploit these reactions using tactics like Darvo, making the victim appear as the aggressor while hiding their own abusive behavior. Now, I know these are usually terms used to describe domestic relationships, but I don't see the difference between that and this. If someone is experiencing constant racism and abuse every day, then it should be no surprise when that person finally hits their breaking point. Perhaps this moment was Karmelo Anthony's breaking point. He was fed up with being talked down to, being trolled, being treated like he's stupid and less than, and this moment caused him to snap. Even though he may have never had this experience with Austin in particular, he could have had these kind of interactions with other people, and so he was already guarded and worked up. Do I think Karmelo needs to face some jail time for murdering Austin? Yes. Of course I do. It's never okay to be violent, but sometimes there are deeper meanings behind people's actions. This leads me into the third reason I think this trial will go in Karmelo's favor. And that reason is because there were no Black people chosen as part of the jury. This will most likely result in an acquittal and retrial. It is to the prosecution's detriment that no Black people were chosen as part of the jury, because the only people that could fully understand the true meaning of what we're talking about here today in this video is a Black person that faces the same judgment and ridicule from society. It would be absurd to deny that this crime has racial biases. I personally think it would be safe to assume that Austin Metcalf wouldn't have reacted as forward and aggressive if it was a white kid sitting near their tent. If it was a white kid that was just looking for some shelter from the rain. To me, not acknowledging the racial implications of this crime is completely unjust, and I think a Supreme Court will see it that way as well. I also wanted to stick up for Karmelo Anthony a little bit here because for some reason, America loves to watch Black men fail and then gather around to kick them while they're down.
Should be swinging from a tree outside this courthouse. Karmelo Anthony should be hanging from a tree. Should be swinging from a tree outside this courthouse. Karmelo Anthony should be hanging from a tree.
I'm sure you all remember Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. Trayvon was a 17-year-old Black male and George Zimmerman is a Latino, but both are American citizens. The tragedy goes, Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African American, was returning from a convenience store when he was noticed by Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer. Zimmerman contacted the non-emergency line of the Sanford Police Department, mentioned that there had been burglaries in the neighborhood, and told the dispatcher that he had observed a real suspicious guy who was walking around looking about. Zimmerman also described Martin as someone up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. After Zimmerman answered the dispatcher's questions about Martin's appearance and his location, and as they were discussing when a police officer would arrive, Zimmerman reported that Martin was running. The dispatcher asked, "Are you following him?" Zimmerman replied, "Yes." Dispatcher, "Okay, we don't need you to do that." Zimmerman replies with, "Okay." Then, in a written account of the incident that Zimmerman gave to the Sanford police, he said he had exited his vehicle prior to this exchange and was returning to it when Martin emerged from the darkness, threatened him, and punched me in the face. After Martin slammed my head into the sidewalk several times, according to Zimmerman, he fired his weapon at Martin at close range, killing him. During Zimmerman's trial, Rachel Gintel, the prosecution's most important witness, provided the only other account of the events leading up to Martin's death. She testified that while she was on the phone with Martin just before he was killed by Zimmerman, she heard Martin ask someone why he was following him, and that person replied, "What you doing around here?" Gintel also testified that she heard sounds of a struggle and Martin saying, get off," before the phone disconnected. The confrontation and gunshot resulted in multiple 911 calls by nearby residents. After police arrived, Zimmerman said he had fired in self-defense. Martin was unarmed, concluding that they could not hold Zimmerman because no available evidence contradicted his version of the event, and because state law permitted the use of deadly force in self-defense. The police police released him. Although the original criminal charge brought against Zimmerman was second-degree murder, the judge also gave the jury the option of convicting him of the lesser charge of manslaughter. In order to find Zimmerman guilty of second-degree murder or manslaughter, the jury had to find not only that Zimmerman had caused Martin's death, but also that he did not do so in self-defense. The issue of self-defense was linked to Florida's law permitting the use of deadly force to defend oneself against a perceived threat, known as a stand your ground law, which was central to debate over the shooting. Instructions to the jury referenced this law, but Zimmerman's lawyers ultimately did not invoke Zimmerman's rights under it because they argued he did not have the option to retreat anyway. On July 13th, 2013, after more than 16 hours of deliberation, the jury found Zimmerman not guilty. So we don't know what happened here, but if I could guess, Zimmerman approached Martin, started an altercation, and when Martin proved to be strong and defend himself, Zimmerman pulled out a gun and shot him after starting and provoking the entire situation. But if precedent is to be followed, this makes me believe Karmelo has a great chance of lessening his charge. There is no real way to prove Karmelo did not stab Austin in self-defense, and the eyewitness testimonies are just not reliable enough to be considered beyond a reasonable doubt. The reason Zimmerman got away is because black men are portrayed as violent people, so it was easy for the jurors to believe that Trayvon started the altercation, where in this case, it's a white victim, so of course the narrative here is much different. White men always get a free pass when doing fucked shit. It's always, he's just a kid. Meanwhile, old boy is 35 with a wife and kids. I truly believe Austin Metcalf's death was just another tally on the death toll caused by the race war in America. We aren't going anywhere fighting against each other. So how long is it going to take until we realize we're stronger together? It's exhausting at this point. Anyways, what do you think about this case? Is it really as black and white as everyone thinks? Or is there a much deeper systemic issue that is being brought to light here? Let me know in the comments. It was great talking to you all, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!